Hi and welcome to Viking Virtual News. My name is Bertie McFishface and this is the programme where we really get to find out more about how the Vikings lived. Tonight we're very lucky to be joined by Isabel, the Viking girl, and she's going to tell us a bit more about Viking life. Hi Isabel. Just to start, can you tell us a bit more about what it was like to be a Viking?
To your surprise, as well as being named the Vikings, we were also referred to as the Northmen.
Right.
As well as being ferocious fighters, the Vikings were also great farmers, fishermen, seafarers and traders. The Vikings came from 3 countries of Scandinavia: Denmark, Norway and Sweden. Land in Scandinavia was very hard to grow crops in, so that's why they came to Britain for good farmland. An interesting fact is that the Vikings generally guided themselves by the sun and the stars.
Yes, right, that's very interesting. I heard a lot about you doing these things called raids, Viking raids. They sound very vicious to me. Can you tell me a bit more about being a Viking raider?
They are very vicious, very, very vicious. When the Vikings raided the Saxons, it was quite easy because they only fought native Britons and amongst themselves. Therefore, they had no unified defence to fend off armies like the Vikings. The Vikings sailed longships and sometimes sailed onto the beach for a surprise attack. Here at Britain, they raided slaves, treasure of kings and silver coins.
Right, well that's very interesting. You've spoken a lot about what it's like to be on the sea as a Viking, but I'm interested, I think our audience will be, about a bit more about what home life was like for a Viking. So can you tell us something about what your house is like, or your home? Do you live in a house?
A whole family often shares a one-room house that has a cauldron in the middle for cooking. They had turf roofs where they ate and slept. Families drank beer and mead, wore woolen clothes that were coloured with dye. They made shoes, boots and belts made by leather, and did loads of farming, cooking, making yarn and crafts. After marriage, money and property belonged jointly to husband and wife. Also, men and women had arranged marriages. The role of women was to run the house and look after the children. In Viking times, there was great risk driving childbirth, as pregnancy was not fully understood. It is so hard being a Viking.
It sounds like a tough life, and I'm hoping that the children weren't drinking beer. I know you also talked a bit about boats, and I know that you've got a tradition of sailing on the seas. What was it like at sea for Vikings?
Places near the sea were perfect for the Vikings, as they needed boats for trading as well as travelling. The Vikings were very good craftsmen and built ships called longships. Longships were quite often up to 30 metres long and were sailed or rowed. Most of the times, Viking longships were made of oak, wood and deck, and on board was about 60 men that could travel up to 200 kilometres a day.
Wow, that is a long time. We know that you had lots of traditions. You had, got a very strong culture. We also know that you have lots of beliefs and stories. Tell us a bit about your beliefs and some of the
The gods in Viking times were named the Norse gods, which were split into 2 families, Vanir and Asir. The Vikings believed that the gods lived in Asgard, a place that was joined to Midgard, which means earth. Odin, the father of the gods, and Thor, the god of thunder, law, and order, were said to be the most important gods. There were 3 goddesses called Norns that looked after the past, the future, the present, and the fate of every child at birth. The Vikings also believed that a person's spirit sailed to the next world in a ship.
Right, that's really interesting. I mean, obviously you were on the ships and you had one out to sea, but you must have had towns and settlements. Tell us a bit about those Viking towns.
Of course. The capital of Viking Britain was Jorvik, which is now York.
Oh, York, I've been there a few times, yes.
It was a major trading town. As many as 15,000 people may have lived in Jorvik. The River Thames made it easy to transport goods on longships. In Jorvik, people traded goods, crafts, pottery, leather and clothes. Places ending in Thorpe, Thwaite, Toft, Kelt, Ness, By and Kirk were Viking towns.
Oh, that's really interesting. I've seen many of those in our own world today. So, whatever happened to these Vikings? I don't see many of them down the high street anymore.
Yeah, you might be wondering why they were so fierce and then they just suddenly declined.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there is actually a story behind it.
Oh, right.
In 16th century, England reconquered much of the land held by the Vikings, and in 954 AD, they drove out Eric Bloodaxe, the last Viking king in Jorvik. After Eric was killed in battle, the Vikings agreed to be ruled by England's king. In 1066 AD, England was conquered by William, Duke of Normandy. The Normans took over all of England, including the Viking lord called Danelaw. In 1069, the Normans burned Jorvik. That was the end of the Viking Age in England.
Sounds very sad. Question I'm often asked, what did the Vikings leave behind? What did the Vikings ever do for us?
All archaeologists have found ruins, treasure hoards, Viking houses, burial sites and carvings on stones. Words they have left behind include scare, anger, die, cake, rotten, mistake, hit, birth, call, loose, low, ransack, wrong, window and wand.
Wow, that's amazing. I think we could all agree that what the legacy that the Vikings left is still seen today. I think that's all we've got time for on tonight's Virtual Vikings. I'd like to thank Isabel for coming and for answering all the questions. And next week we have For the Thunder God here to talk to us about what it's like life as a god. Thank you very much and see you next week.
Bye.